The matte black G-Wagon rolled to a stop at the fortified gates of Biko Tower, and every armed guard in the security compound went rigid. Because stepping out of that vehicle was an Omega they had explicit orders to shoot on sight if he ever set foot in Seoul again. Philip Stewart. The same man who vanished 11 years ago, the one their boss erased from existence so completely that even whispering his name could get you disappeared. But Philip wasn't cowering. He stood there in a tailored black suit, head high, moving with the kind of dangerous confidence that made alphas nervous. And he wasn't alone. Beside him was a child. A boy who made the head of security drop his tablet. The kid was a carbon copy of Simon Seo-jin. Same razor-sharp jawline. Same predatory dark eyes that could freeze blood. Same presence that made grown men step back without thinking. Even the way the boy tilted his head, assessing the guards like prey, was identical to the alpha who ruled Seoul's underworld with an iron fist. Jesus Christ, someone breathed into the comm. Is that? Get the boss. Now. The head guard's hand trembled as he reached for the emergency line, because he remembered what happened the last time someone mentioned the American Omega's name in Simon's presence. 2 syndicate members ended up in body bags. 5 more were sent to the hospital. And Simon personally burned every photograph, every record, every trace of Philip Stewart from the Biko archives while his eyes bled alpha red with rage and something that looked too much like grief. But now Philip was here, standing at the gates like a ghost returned from the dead, and the boy beside him had Simon's DNA written all over his face. This wasn't just a visit. This was a declaration of war. This was a reckoning 11 years in the making. The cameras captured everything, the Omega who was supposed to be forgotten, the child who shouldn't exist, and the moment Seoul's most dangerous alpha's carefully constructed world began to crack. Let me take you back. 11 years ago, before the blood and the betrayal, before Philip Stewart became the one name Simon Seo-jin couldn't afford to remember. Simon Seo-jin stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office on the 47th floor of Biko Tower, watching Seoul sprawl beneath him like a kingdom he'd conquered with blood and brutality. From up here, the city looked clean. Orderly. You couldn't see the bodies buried in construction sites, the money laundered through legitimate businesses, the politicians who answered his calls at 3 a.m. because they had no choice. His reflection in the glass showed what 11 years of ruling the Biko syndicate had made him. Sharp jaw, colder eyes, expensive suit tailored to hide the scars his father's lessons had left. At 34, Simon Seo-jin was the kind of alpha other alphas crossed the street to avoid. His scent alone, dark cedar and gunmetal, made Omegas drop their eyes and back away. He liked it that way. Control meant survival. Emotion meant weakness. And weakness got you killed. The phone on his desk buzzed. Once. The emergency line. Simon's hand moved to it with practiced calm, but something in his alpha instincts prickled, a warning, ancient and animal, that the ground was about to shift beneath his feet. Speak, he said, voice flat. Sir. His head of security sounded like he was trying not to hyperventilate. We have a situation at the front gate. You need to see this. I'm sending footage now. The screen on his desk flickered to life. And Simon's entire world stopped. The footage was crystal clear, security camera angle, timestamp reading 2:47 p.m., the fortified entrance to Biko Tower. A black G-Wagon. The door opening. And then, Philip. For exactly 3 seconds, Simon forgot how to breathe. 11 years. 11 years of shoving every memory into a locked box in the back of his mind, of drowning himself in work and violence and the cold body of an Omega he didn't want, of pretending that the American exchange student who'd looked at him like he was something worth saving had never existed. But there he was. Older, like the voice on the phone had said. The soft edges Simon remembered were gone, replaced by sharp cheekbones and a jawline that could cut glass. Philip had filled out, his shoulders broader in that perfectly tailored black suit, moving with a predator's grace that made Simon's alpha hindbrain sit up and pay attention. His hair was shorter, faded on the sides, and when he turned to look directly at the camera, Simon's chest constricted. Those eyes. Still the same warm brown that used to look at him in the darkness of a tiny Seoul apartment, when Simon was just a broken second son and Philip was the only person who didn't fear him. But now there was steel in them. Challenge. Philip Stewart had learned how to be dangerous. And he was beautiful. More beautiful than Simon's memory, more beautiful than any Omega had a right to be, and Simon felt the ghost of their incomplete bond flared to life in his chest like a knife wound that had never properly healed. But then the camera angle shifted, and Simon saw the boy. Every muscle in his body locked. His alpha instincts roared to life so violently that his eyes flashed red and his scent flooded the room, making the windows rattle. Because the child standing next to Philip wasn't just similar to Simon. He was identical. 10 years old, maybe, with Simon's exact features carved into a smaller face. The same dark eyes. The same way of standing, weight balanced like a fighter. The same genetic markers that screamed Biko bloodline so loudly that there was no mistaking it. His son. Simon had a son. The word detonated in his mind like a grenade. All these years, he told himself Philip had moved on, found some soft beater in America, lived a good life far away from Saul's violence. He'd never let himself think about the other possibility. The one his father's surveillance team had reported 11 years ago, the one he'd refused to believe because believing it would have destroyed him. Philip had been pregnant when Simon cut him loose. And he'd kept the child. Simon's hands were shaking. He, who hadn't trembled since his father beat the weakness out of him at age 12, was shaking like a newly presented alpha. The carefully constructed mask he'd worn for 11 years, the cold, untouchable Mafia king, cracked down the middle. Behind him, the office door opened. Kang Minwo, his arranged mate, stepped inside without knocking because he never knocked. Simon, darling, the contract with the bosun. Get out. Simon's voice came out in an alpha command so vicious that Minwo actually stumbled backward, his Omega instincts overriding his arrogance. What? Out. Minwo fled. Simon looked back at the screen. Philip was staring at the camera now, and even through the digital footage, Simon could feel the weight of that gaze. It said, I survived you. I won without you. And now I'm going to make you face what you threw away. The boy, Elijah, his mind supplied, remembering the name from the letter Simon had burned without reading, stood close to Philip's side, protected but not cowering. Learning to be fearless from an Omega who'd had to become a warrior. Simon's finger moved to the comm button. His head of security answered immediately. Sir, what are your orders? Should we bring them up? Simon's voice was rough, stripped of its usual ice. Now. Sir, your father said. I don't care what my father said. The alpha command in his voice made the phone crackle. You have 60 seconds to get them into the private elevator, or I'm coming down there myself. Are we clear? A pause. Then, crystal clear, sir. Simon ended the call and turned back to the window, watching his reflection. The mask was gone. For the first time in 11 years, Simon Seojin looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down at everything he'd lost. Philip was coming. And nothing, not his father, not the syndicate, not 11 years of carefully built walls, was going to save him from what happened next. 11 years ago. Philip Stewart stepped off the plane at Incheon International Airport with 2 suitcases, a partial scholarship to Yonsei University, and absolutely no idea what he was walking into. At 22, he thought he understood what being an Omega meant. He'd grown up in Brooklyn, where the Omegaverse dynamics were more relaxed, where Omegas ran businesses and didn't lower their eyes when Alphas passed. His parents had raised him to be proud, to never let biology define his worth. The scholarship letter had called him exceptional, high marks, leadership potential, the kind of student who'd represent American excellence abroad. Seoul shattered that confidence within 48 hours. The stare started at immigration. Not the curious glances he expected as a black foreigner, but something else. Something that made his skin crawl. Alphas would stop mid-conversation when he passed, their nostrils flaring as they scented him. Betas whispered behind their hands. Other Omegas, almost exclusively pale, delicate, Korean, looked at him like he was a fascinating zoo exhibit. Exotic, one of his Korean language classmates said on his 3rd day, smiling like she'd given him a compliment. So different. Your scent must be very interesting. Philip had smiled back, teeth tight, and said nothing. By the end of his first month, he'd learned the rules. Don't make eye contact with alphas unless they speak first. Don't take the subway during rush hour when suppressants might fail. Don't walk alone at night. Don't be too confident, too American, too other. The university was prestigious but expensive, and his scholarship covered tuition, not living. So Philip did what he'd always done, he worked 3 part-time jobs. Morning shift at a cafe near campus, serving expensive lattes to students who had more money than ambition. Afternoon English tutoring for businessmen who stared at his mouth while he spoke. And nights he worked at a 24-hour GS25 convenience store in Gangnam, from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., when Seoul's underbelly came out to play. The night manager, an older beta woman named Mrs. Park, had hired him without hesitation. "You're Omega," she'd said bluntly. "But you're foreign, so the drunk salarymen won't try anything. And if they do," she'd pull the baseball bat from under the counter. "Use this." Philip had taken the job. Most nights were quiet. Salarymen buying instant ramen and soju. High school students cramming for exams with energy drinks. The occasional sex worker grabbing cigarettes between clients. Philip restocked shelves, practiced his Korean with Mrs. Park, and pretended the bone-deep exhaustion was temporary. It was 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in November when he walked in. Philip had been reorganizing the bandage section. Someone had destroyed the inventory looking for hangover cures, when the door chimed. He glanced up automatically, the customer service smile already forming on his face. It died instantly. The man in the doorway looked like death walking. Mid-20s, maybe, tall and broad-shouldered in a black shirt soaked with blood on one side. His face was a mess, split lip, bruised jaw, one eye swollen nearly shut. But it was the way he stood that made Philip's Omega instincts scream danger. Predator. Alpha. The kind who'd rip out your throat and not lose sleep over it. The stranger scent hit Philip a second later, cutting through the suppressants he'd taken religiously, cedar and gunmetal and something darker, like smoke from a fire that never went out. Pure, undiluted alpha dominance that made Philip's knees want to buckle. He locked them. Straightened his spine. Met those cold, dark eyes with a calm he absolutely did not feel. "Can I help you?" Philip asked in careful Korean. The alpha blinked, like he'd forgotten other people could speak. He moved to the medical aisle with a slight limp, grabbed bandages, antiseptic, painkillers. His hands were bruised and split across the knuckles, from hitting someone, not being hit. Philip rang him up in silence. The alpha paid in cash, exact change, without looking at him. Just grabbed the bag and turned to leave. He made it 3 steps before his leg buckled. Philip was around the counter before his brain caught up to his body, catching the alpha's elbow. The contact sent a shockwave up his arm, their scents colliding, something clicking in his chest that felt like recognition and terror in equal measure. The alpha jerked away like Philip had burned him. "Don't." The word came out in a growl that vibrated with alpha command. Philip held up both hands, stepping back. "You're bleeding through your shirt," he said evenly. "There's a bathroom in the back. Clean yourself up before you pass out on my floor and I have to explain a body to my manager." For a long moment, the alpha just stared at him. Like he'd never encountered an Omega who didn't cower, who met danger with sarcasm instead of submission. Then, impossibly, his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "You're not from here," the alpha said. His Korean was perfect, but there was something exhausted underneath it. "Brooklyn," Philip replied. "You're not a regular drunk salaryman." "No." The alpha's eyes were flat, empty. "I'm not." He limped toward the bathroom without another word, leaving a trail of blood drops on the linoleum that Philip would have to clean before Mrs. Park came back. Philip watched him go, his heart hammering against his ribs, the incomplete bond already forming in his chest like a hook he hadn't asked for. He didn't know the stranger's name yet. Didn't know he was Simon Seo-jin, second son of the Biko syndicate, a man being beaten into shape by his father's fists and his family's brutality. All Philip knew was that he'd just met someone dangerous. And he'd see him again. Simon came back to the GS25 every Tuesday at 3 a.m. for 3 weeks straight. Same routine, bandages, antiseptic, cash. Never spoke beyond a grunt of acknowledgement. Never explained the fresh bruises that decorated his face like a rotating gallery of violence. Philip didn't ask. In his neighborhood back in Brooklyn, you learned early that some questions got you hurt. But on the 4th Tuesday, Simon didn't show. Philip told himself he didn't care. The dangerous alpha with the empty eyes was none of his business. He had midterms to study for, rent to scrape together, a life to build that didn't involve Seoul's criminal underworld. He was restocking energy drinks at 4 a.m. when Mrs. Park called from the back office. "Yeah, Philip, trash needs to go out before dawn pickup." Philip grabbed the bags, shouldered open the back door into the alley, and nearly tripped over a body. Shit. Simon was crumpled against the dumpster like discarded trash, barely conscious. This wasn't bar fight damage. This was systematic, brutal, the kind of beating meant to break bones and spirits. His face was unrecognizable under the blood and swelling. His breath came in shallow, rattling gasps that meant broken ribs. And his scent, usually so controlled, was bleeding out in waves of pain and something that made Philip's omega instincts howl. Alpha in distress. Protect. Help. No, Philip said out loud, to himself, to his biology. Absolutely not. Simon's eyes cracked open. Unfocused, glassy with pain. "Go away," he slurred in English. "Not safe." "You think I don't know that?" Philip dropped the trash bags. His hands were already moving, checking for arterial bleeding, head injuries, anything immediately fatal. "Who did this to you?" Simon laughed. It sounded like broken glass. Family, tradition. His own family did this. Philip made a decision he'd regret for the next 11 years. "Can you walk?" "Maybe. My apartment's 2 blocks away. You're going to lean on me, and we're going to move fast. Understand?" Simon tried to shake his head and immediately regretted it, going gray-green. "Can't compromise you." Too late. Philip got an arm around Simon's waist, took most of his weight. The alpha was heavy, solid muscle even beaten half to death. "Move." They made it to Philip's tiny studio in Hongdae through sheer stubbornness, Philip's determination and Simon's pride refusing to let him pass out. The apartment was barely more than a closet with a bathroom, but it was clean, anonymous, and most importantly, his. Philip kicked the door shut and guided Simon to the narrow bed. The alpha collapsed onto it, bleeding on Philip's only clean sheets. "Stay awake," Philip ordered, already pulling out his limited first aid supplies. "You might have a concussion." "You don't have to do this." "I know." Philip started cleaning blood, assessing damage. 3 broken ribs, definitely. Possible internal bleeding. The kind of injuries that needed a hospital. But Simon had said family tradition. Which meant hospitals would ask questions. Questions that got people disappeared. So Philip worked with what he had. Basic medical training from a high school EMT course, YouTube videos, and pure determination. He cleaned wounds, wrapped ribs, monitored vitals. Simon passed out twice. Each time, Philip's omega instinct screamed, and he found himself checking the alpha's pulse with shaking hands. Somewhere around dawn, Simon's fever broke. His breathing evened out. And Philip realized he was sitting on the floor beside the bed, watching the rise and fall of the alpha's chest, the incomplete bond in his own chest humming with relief. "This is insane," Philip whispered to the empty room. Simon's eyes opened. Clearer now, but still haunted. "You should have left me in the alley." "Probably. I'm dangerous." "I noticed." "My name is Simon." It came out raw, honest. "Simon Seojin. And being near me will get you killed." Philip met those dark eyes. "Philip Stewart. And I'm not as fragile as you think." Something shifted between them in that moment. The bond that had been forming since that first night in the convenience store snapped into place, not complete, not a true mating bond, but something. A connection that made Philip's sense sweeten and Simon's alpha instincts rise despite his injuries. "You need to go," Philip said, even as everything in him screamed the opposite. "Before whoever did this comes looking." Simon sat up slowly, pain written across his face. "They won't. My father doesn't clean up after his lessons." He paused at the door, looked back. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just, don't die in an alley, okay?" Simon almost smiled. "I'll try." He came back the next night. And the night after that. The 6 months that followed were stolen moments in Philip's cramped apartment. Simon would appear after midnight, sometimes bruised, always careful to ensure he wasn't followed. They'd sit on Philip's second-hand couch, and Simon would correct his Korean pronunciation while Philip made instant ramen because it was all he could afford. Simon taught him how to read Hangul, how to navigate Seoul's unspoken hierarchies, how to curse properly in Korean. Philip taught Simon that touch didn't have to mean violence, that silence could be comfortable, that someone could look at him and see a person instead of a weapon. They didn't talk about Simon's family. Didn't discuss why an alpha from the Biko syndicate kept coming back to a broke Omega's apartment. Didn't acknowledge the bond growing stronger between them, the way their scents had started to harmonize, the way Philip's heat suppressants were becoming less effective around Simon's presence. They existed in a bubble, pretending the outside world didn't exist. On a February night, snow falling outside, Simon kissed Philip for the first time. Gentle, terrified, like he'd forgotten how to be soft and was trying to remember. Philip kissed him back and thought, "This will destroy me." He was right. Simon's phone rang at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday in March, pulling him from the first peaceful sleep he'd had in years. Philip's warmth was pressed against his side, the Omegas breathing deep and even, and for one perfect moment Simon let himself believe this could last. Then he saw his father's name on the screen. Baek Doyan never called. He summoned. Simon extracted himself from Philip's embrace carefully, pulling on his clothes in the dark. Philip stirred, reaching for him with sleep-heavy eyes. "Everything okay?" "Go back to sleep," Simon whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I'll be back before dawn." It was the last lie he'd tell him. The call was 3 words, "Come home. Now." Simon found his father in the compound's main hall, surrounded by stone-faced syndicate elders. And in the center of the room, covered by a white sheet, was a body. Simon knew before his father pulled back the cloth. His older brother, Jihoon, lay there with 3 bullet holes in his chest. His eyes were still open, frozen in surprise. He'd been 28, brilliant, ruthless, everything their father had groomed him to be. The perfect heir to the Biko Empire. Dead. "Southside crew," Baek Doyan said, his voice empty of emotion. "They hit the convoy on the way back from Busan. Killed 6 of our men. Your brother died protecting a shipment." He looked at Simon with eyes like chips of black ice. "You're the heir now." Simon's world tilted on its axis. "Father, There's no discussion." Doyan's alpha command filled the room, making even the elders drop their eyes. "You'll take over Jihoon's operations immediately. The Busan territory, the shipping contracts, the political connections. Everything." Simon's mind was racing. Being heir meant full-time syndicate work. No more anonymity. No more stolen nights in a Hongdae studio apartment. No more Philip. As if reading his thoughts, Doyan's expression hardened. "And that situation you think I don't know about? The American Omega? It ends tonight." Simon's blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you're—" "Don't insult me." Doyan pulled a folder from his desk, threw it at Simon's feet. Photographs spilled out, surveillance images of Simon entering Philip's building, leaving at dawn, kissing him in the shadows. Weeks of documentation. "Did you think I wouldn't have you followed? That I'd let my son whore himself out to some foreign Omega without knowing every detail?" Simon's hands clenched into fists. "His not. His a liability." Doyan's voice cut like a blade. "You're the heir to a $3 billion empire. You don't get to play house with scholarship students. You'll marry Kang Minwo like we planned. Strengthen the alliance with the Kang family. Produce legitimate heirs. That's your duty. I won't abandon him." Doyan smiled. It was the most terrifying thing Simon had ever seen. "Then I'll have him removed. Cleanly. Quietly. Foreign students disappear all the time in Seoul. Terrible tragedy. The American embassy will file a report, nothing will come of it, and in 6 months everyone will forget he existed." Simon's alpha instincts roared, his sense spiking with rage and fear. "You wouldn't." "I would." Doyan leaned forward. "But I'm giving you a choice, because you're my son. Walk away from him tonight. Completely. No contact, no explanations, no goodbyes. Let him think you used him and got bored. Or, He paused for effect. I'll send a cleaning crew to his apartment tomorrow morning. He'll resist, of course. They always do. And it will be messy. The room spun. Simon couldn't breathe. Oh, and there's one more thing you should know. Doyen opened another file, slid a document across the desk. Medical records. Stolen from a clinic in Gangnam. Your Omega is pregnant. 8 weeks. Congratulations. The words detonated in Simon's skull. Pregnant. Philip was carrying his child. The timing is unfortunate, Doyen continued, clinical. But not insurmountable. He'll go back to America, have the baby there, raise it alone. You'll never see either of them again. That's the kind option, Simon. The alternative is that neither of them see next week. Simon's father stood, buttoned his suit jacket. You have 24 hours. End it, or I will. And if you're thinking of running with him, of being noble, that word dripped with contempt. Remember that I own half the police force and all the airports. You won't make it out of Seoul. But he might. If you let him go. The elders filed out silently, leaving Simon alone with his brother's body and an impossible choice. He could fight. Take Philip and run, try to protect him, watch his father hunt them both down and kill them slowly to make an example. Or he could do the one thing that might keep Philip alive. Break his heart so completely that he'd leave Korea and never look back. Simon looked at Jihoon's corpse. His brother had died for the syndicate. For duty. For their father's empire. And Simon realized he'd been a fool to think he could ever escape that fate. At 11:47 p.m., Simon blocked Philip's number. Deleted every message, every photo, every trace of him from his phone. He told his assistant to refuse any calls, any visits, any attempt at contact from Philip Stewart. Then he went to his apartment, drank a bottle of whiskey, and didn't let himself think about the Omega who'd be waking up alone tomorrow, waiting for a man who would never come back. The bond in his chest screamed. Simon ignored it. This was mercy, he told himself. This was survival. This was the choice his father had given him, Philip's life, or Simon's love. There was no world where he got to keep both. Philip knew something was wrong when Simon didn't come back at dawn. He told himself there was an explanation. An emergency. Family business. Something that didn't mean Simon had just vanished like smoke. By the second day, Philip's calls went straight to voicemail. By the third, he swallowed his pride and went to Simon's apartment building in Gangnam. The doorman, who'd always nodded politely when Philip visited, looked through him like he was invisible. I'm sorry, sir. Mr. Seojin has left instructions. No visitors. Can you just tell him Philip is here? Please. I need to. No visitors means no visitors. The doorman's hand moved toward the security button. I suggest you leave. Philip tried Simon's office next. The Biko syndicate operated out of a gleaming tower in the financial district, all steel and glass, respectability hiding the blood underneath. He made it as far as the lobby before two men in dark suits materialized on either side of him. Mr. Stewart. The older one's smile didn't reach his eyes. You're not welcome here. Leave now, or we'll make you leave. I just need 5 minutes. Please. Just tell him. The younger guard grabbed Philip's arm, grip bruising. His alpha scent rolled out in a wave of dominance and threat. The boss doesn't want to see you. Take the hint. Philip jerked free, heart hammering. But he left. Because he was starting to understand. Simon hadn't been taken. Hadn't been killed. He'd made a choice. That night, Philip's heat suppressants failed for the first time in 3 years. The cramps hit him in waves, his body calling for an alpha who was never coming back. He rode it out alone in his apartment, biting down on a pillow to keep from screaming, the incomplete bond in his chest tearing itself apart. When the fever broke 2 days later, Philip dragged himself to a clinic in Itaewon that catered to foreigners, no questions asked. The doctor was a middle-aged beta woman who'd seen everything. She ran the tests in silence, then delivered the results with clinical detachment. You're pregnant. About 9 weeks. Omega pregnancies can be terminated safely up to. No. Philip's voice was raw from disuse. I'm keeping it. The doctor studied him. The father? Not in the picture. Do you have support? Family here? The pregnancy will affect your scholarship, I'll figure it out. Philip stood on shaking legs. Thank you for your time. He made it outside before the reality hit him. He was alone, pregnant, in a country that didn't want him, carrying the child of a man who'd thrown him away like garbage. Philip allowed himself exactly 10 minutes to fall apart in an alley behind the clinic. Then he dried his eyes, straightened his spine, and made a plan. He couldn't stay in Korea. Simon had made that clear. But he wouldn't slink away in shame either. 3 weeks later, Philip stood in the lobby of Biko Tower one last time. Same guards, same contemptuous stares. But this time, Philip had a sealed envelope. Give this to Simon Seo-jin, he said quietly. I know he won't see me. But make sure he gets this. Today. The older guard took it like it might explode. We can't promise. You'll give it to him, Philip interrupted, his omega sense sharpening with command that surprised them both, because if you don't, I'll come back. And I'll make a scene that gets everyone in this building investigated. Including you. He left before they could respond. The letter said 3 things. His name is Elijah. He'll know the truth about you. And one day, I'm coming back. Philip flew back to New York 2 days later. The first year was survival. Philip moved back in with his parents in Brooklyn, endured their disappointment and worry, and had Elijah in a hospital that didn't ask questions about absent alpha fathers. He held his son for the first time and saw Simon's eyes staring back at him, and felt something harden in his chest that had nothing to do with bitterness and everything to do with purpose. Year 2, Philip started a tech consulting business from his parents' basement, using the coding skills he'd learned at Yonsei. He worked during Elijah's naps, through the night when the baby finally slept, building something that was his. Year 5, his startup secured its first major contract. Cloud infrastructure for financial firms. Philip moved into his own apartment in Manhattan, hired his first employee, and started building an empire Simon would never control. Year 8, Philip's company went public. He became a millionaire overnight, featured in Forbes as the Omega disrupting tech. Reporters asked about Elijah's father. Philip smiled and said, not part of our story. But Elijah was always part of the story. Every year on his birthday, Philip would sit with his son and tell him one truth about Simon Seo-jin. Never bitter. Never cruel. Just honest. Age 6, your father is Korean. He comes from a powerful family that does dangerous work. Age 7, he loved me, once. I believe that. But he chose his family's legacy over us. Age 8, he's not a good man, Elijah. But he's not entirely bad either. People are complicated. Age 9, if you ever want to meet him, I'll make it happen. But only when you're ready. Age 10, Elijah looked at his father with Simon's eyes and said, I'm ready now. Philip had been preparing for this moment for 11 years. He booked 3 tickets to Seoul, one way, because he wasn't running anymore. He was returning. On the flight, Elijah fell asleep against his shoulder, and Philip looked at his son, this perfect, fierce boy who had Simon's face and Philip's strength, and felt the incomplete bond in his chest pulse with anticipation. Simon Seo-jin had thrown them away to save their lives. Now Philip was going to show him exactly what he'd lost. And make him choose again. The private elevator opened directly into Simon's penthouse office with a soft chime that sounded like a death knell. Philip stepped out first, and the air itself seemed to contract. 11 years. 11 years since Simon had last seen him, touched him, breathed the same air. And now Philip was here, in his space, looking like vengeance wrapped in a tailored suit. He'd gotten taller somehow, or maybe just learned how to carry himself like he owned every room he entered. The soft edges Simon remembered were gone, replaced by sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could cut glass. His hair was shorter, faded on the sides, and those warm brown eyes. They looked at Simon with absolutely zero forgiveness. Hello, Simon. Philip's voice was deeper, rougher. American accent stronger than Simon remembered, like he'd stripped away every trace of Korea from his life. You look good. Murder and betrayal must agree with you. Simon's throat closed. He'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, scripted it in his head during sleepless nights. But nothing prepared him for the reality of Philip standing 10 feet away, alive and furious in here. Then the boy stepped out from behind Philip. Elijah. Simon's son looked at him with Simon's own eyes, assessing and fearless, taking in every detail of the father he'd never met. He had Philip's warm brown skin and full lips, but everything else, the bone structure, the way he stood with his weight balanced like a fighter, the slight tilt of his head when analyzing a threat, was pure Biko bloodline. The incomplete bond in Simon's chest roared to life, recognizing Philip's scent even through the suppressants. Cedar and rain and something uniquely Philip that made Simon's alpha instinct scream mine, ours, protect. But overlaid with that was something new, Elijah's scent, not yet fully developed but already showing signs of presentation. And underneath it, buried deep, was Simon's own genetic markers. His son. His child. Are you my father? Elijah asked, voice steady and clear. No fear. No hesitation. Just a 10-year-old boy demanding truth from the most dangerous alpha in soul. Simon's carefully constructed mask, 11 years of ice and control, shattered. Yes. The word came out raw, scraped from somewhere deep. Yes, I am. Elijah nodded, like Simon had confirmed something he already knew. Dad said you chose your family's crime empire over us. Is that true? Dad. The word was a knife between Simon's ribs. Philip was dad. Simon was just the genetic donor who'd abandoned them. Elijah, Philip said quietly, a warning. No. Simon's voice cracked. It's a fair question. He looked at his son, this fierce boy he'd never held, never protected. Yes. I chose my father's orders over you and Philip. I thought I was saving your lives. I was wrong. You didn't even try to find us, Elijah said, and there was Philip's bluntness in him. 11 years. You could have looked. Simon had no defense for that. Because Elijah was right, he could have searched, could have reached out, could have done something besides bury himself in syndicate work and pretend the hole in his chest would eventually close. I know, Simon said. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix anything, Elijah replied. Then, devastating in its simplicity, but Dad says everyone deserves a chance to do better. So I'm giving you one. Don't waste it. The boy walked to the window, giving them space, and Simon was left facing Philip alone. The Omega moved closer, and Simon's entire body went taut with awareness. Even after 11 years, even through suppressants, Philip's scent called to him. The incomplete bond between them pulsed with pain and longing and rage, all the emotions they'd never processed, never resolved, just buried and let fester. You look like you've seen a ghost, Philip said softly. Is that what I am to you, Simon? A ghost you tried to forget. I never forgot. Simon's hands clenched at his sides to keep from reaching for him. Not for a single day. But you never came back. Philip's voice was controlled, but Simon could hear the fury underneath. You threw me away. Threw us away. And now I'm supposed to believe you suffered? That you missed us? That you cared? I did what I thought would keep you alive. You made that choice for me. Philip stepped closer, close enough that Simon could see the gold flecks in his eyes, the slight tremor in his jaw. You didn't ask. Didn't explain. Didn't give me a chance to fight for us. You just erased me like I was nothing. You were everything. The confession ripped out of Simon. You were the only good thing in my life, and my father threatened to kill you. To make it slow and painful and make sure I watched. What the hell was I supposed to do? Trust me. Philip's control cracked, emotion bleeding through. You were supposed to trust that I was strong enough to handle the truth. That we could have figured it out together. But you didn't. You played the martyr and destroyed us both. Simon's sense spiked, grief and regret and desperate longing. His alpha instincts were screaming to drop to his knees, to beg forgiveness, to do whatever it took to make this right. But Philip wasn't done. I came back because Elijah deserves to know his father, Philip said, voice steady again. Not because I've forgiven you. Not because I want you back. You lost that right when you chose silence over trust. He paused, let that sink in. But if you want a chance to know your son, you're going to have to earn it. From both of us. I'll do whatever it takes. Simon meant it with every fiber of his being. Good. Philip's smile was sharp, dangerous. Because your father and your arranged mate are on their way up right now. I made sure of it. He glanced at the elevator display showing 2 calls incoming. Let's see what you choose this time, Simon. Empire or family? Make it count. The elevator chimed. And Simon realized Philip hadn't come back for closure. He'd come back for war. The elevator doors opened, and 2 figures stepped into the office like death incarnate. Kang Minwo entered first, and Philip understood immediately why Simon's father had chosen him. The Omega was devastatingly beautiful in the way poisonous things often are, delicate features, porcelain skin, dressed in a cream designer suit that probably cost more than Philip's first car. But his eyes were cold, calculating, and when he smiled at Philip, it was pure venom. Behind him came Baek Doyan. Simon's father moved like a predator who'd never known fear, 70 years old but still radiating the kind of alpha dominance that made people's hindbrain scream danger. He wore a traditional black hanbok, and Philip noticed his hands, scarred, brutal, the hands of a man who'd killed personally and often. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. So, Minwo said, his voice musical and vicious, the rumors are true. The American whore actually came back. He circled Philip like a shark scenting blood, his scent, orchids and something chemical, deliberately invasive. I have to admire the audacity. Most Omegas my fiancé discards have the sense to stay discarded. Minwo. Simon's voice was alpha command, but the Omega ignored him. What kind of Omega whores himself out to an alpha, gets knocked up, and then has the gall to come back 11 years later with a bastard? Minwo's eyes slid to Elijah, dismissive and cruel. Did you think Simon would suddenly develop a conscience? That he'd choose your little mistake over everything we've built? Philip's scent sharpened, not with submission, but with challenge. I didn't come back for Simon. I came back so my son could meet his father. What Simon does with that information is his choice. Your son? Minwo repeated, laughing. That thing isn't enough. Baek Doyan's voice cut through the room like a blade. He hadn't raised his volume, but every person in the office felt the weight of it. His eyes, black and empty, fixed on Philip. You were given a choice 11 years ago, Mr. Stewart. Leave Korea and never return. You chose poorly. Philip met the old alpha's gaze without flinching. With respect, sir, you don't get to make choices for me anymore. Is that so? Doyan's smile was terrifying. I think you misunderstand your position. You're a foreign Omega standing in my building, in my city, with no legal protections and no leverage. I could have you and that child disappeared before sunset, and the American embassy would file paperwork that goes nowhere. Father, Simon interjected, moving between Doyan and Philip. This isn't. Silence. The alpha command hit Simon like a physical blow, making him stagger. Years of conditioning, of being beaten into submission, of learning that his father's word was law, it all crashed down on him. You've embarrassed this family enough. I gave you one task 11 years ago, end this distraction. You failed. So I'll finish it. Doyan's eyes shifted to Elijah, who stood by the window watching everything with unsettling calm. The boy is the problem. Remove him, and the Omega will leave on his own. Philip's sense spiked with fear and fury. Don't you dare. He has Simon's face, Doyan continued, clinical. That's unfortunate. But bastards have unfortunate accidents all the time. A fall from this height, for example. Tragic. The foreign Omega will return to America to grieve, and will never speak of this again. He started walking toward Elijah. Everything happened at once. Philip lunged forward, Omega instincts overriding common sense. Minwo grabbed him, fingers digging into his arm with intent to bruise, to hurt. And Doyan reached for Elijah. Simon moved. One moment he was frozen by his father's command. The next, something primal and unstoppable detonated inside him. His alpha instincts didn't just override the conditioning, they shattered it. His eyes flashed red, his scent exploded through the room with enough force to crack the windows, and he crossed the space between them in a blur of motion. Simon's hand locked around his father's throat and slammed him into the wall hard enough to leave cracks in the concrete. Touch my son, Simon growled, voice distorted by alpha fury, and I will rip your spine out through your throat. The room went deathly silent. Beck Doyen's eyes widened, not with fear, but with shock. Because in 34 years, Simon had never raised a hand against him. Had endured every beating, every humiliation, every lesson without fighting back. Until now. Simon. Doyen's voice was strained, dangerous. Let me go, or what? Simon's grip tightened. You'll beat me again? Kill me? Try. The alpha dominance rolling off him was tsunami level, making Minwo whimper and drop to his knees, making even Doyen's legendary control waver. But before you do, understand this, I will burn the Biko Syndicate to the ground before I let you touch my child. The incomplete bond between Simon and Philip fled to life with agonizing intensity, 11 years of suppressed connection igniting all at once. Philip gasped, doubling over as the phantom bond marks on his neck burned like brands. Their scents collided, merged, creating a harmonic that screamed mates, pack, family. Simon felt it too, the bond trying to complete itself, trying to seal what they'd started 11 years ago. It was agony and ecstasy, the biological imperative to claim, protect, keep his Omega and their child. But he couldn't let it distract him. Elijah is my heir, Simon announced, still holding his father against the wall. Philip Stewart is under my protection. Anyone who harms either of them answers to me. Starting with you, father. He released Doyen, who staggered back, hand to his throat, staring at his son like he was seeing him for the first time. You've lost your mind, Doyen rasped. That foreign Omega has made you weak. No. Simon's voice was absolute. He made me remember what I was before you beat the humanity out of me. And I'm done being your weapon. Minwo scrambled to his feet, sense sour with fear and rage. Simon, think about what you're doing. The merger with my family, the Busan territory, everything we've planned is over. Simon didn't even look at him. Our arrangement is dissolved. Get out. You can't just get out. The Alpha command was absolute, irresistible. Minwo fled, practically running for the elevator. Baek Doyen remained, and the look in his eyes was pure calculation. You're making an enemy you can't afford, boy. Then I'll deal with the consequences. Simon's stance was warrior-ready, protective, positioned between his father and his family. But they're my consequences now. Not yours. Doyen's smile was ice. Very well. But understand, you've started a war. And in war, there are always casualties. His eyes slid to Philip, to Elijah. Choose carefully which hills you're willing to die on. He left with the slow, measured steps of a predator who knew the hunt was far from over. The moment the elevator doors closed, Simon's legs gave out. The adrenaline crash hit him like a freight train, and he collapsed to his knees, shaking with the aftershocks of breaking every rule his father had beaten into him. Philip knelt beside him, and the bond between them pulsed with shared pain and tentative hope. You chose, Philip whispered, hand hovering near Simon's shoulder but not quite touching. You actually chose. I should have chosen 11 years ago. Simon's voice broke. I'm sorry. God, Philip, I'm so sorry. Elijah walked over, looking down at the father he'd just met, this dangerous, broken alpha who'd nearly killed his own grandfather to protect a son he didn't know. That was pretty cool, Elijah said quietly. Then, with devastating simplicity, can we go get pizza? I'm hungry. Despite everything, the violence, the years of pain, the impossible situation they were in, Philip laughed. It was broken and watery, but genuine. Yeah, he said, looking at Simon with something that might, eventually, become forgiveness. We can get pizza. Simon called the emergency syndicate meeting for 8 p.m. that same night. Philip watched from the penthouse as black cars converged on Biko Tower like vultures circling a corpse. The organization's 30 most powerful members, underbosses, territory commanders, family patriarchs who'd built their empires on blood and extortion. They came because Simon commanded it, but also because word had already spread, the heir had defied Baek Doyen. The balance of power was shifting, and sharks could smell blood in the water. You don't have to do this, Philip said quietly. Elijah was asleep in Simon's private quarters, exhausted from the day's emotional violence. We can leave. Go back to New York. You can visit, we can figure out. No. Simon was putting on armor, literally. A bulletproof vest under his shirt, a knife in his boot, a gun at the small of his back. Preparing for war. I'm done running. Done choosing the easy path. He looked at Philip, and his eyes were clearer than they'd been in 11 years. I want to know my son. He stopped, recalibrated. I want the chance to earn back what I destroyed. That starts tonight. They'll try to kill you. Probably. Simon's smile was grim. But I've survived worse. He left Philip in the penthouse with 6 guards, loyal men who'd served Simon personally, not his father. The subtext was clear. If this went badly, they'd get Philip and Elijah out of Seoul before Doyen's people could reach them. Philip stood at the window and watched Simon enter the building's main conference hall 4 to 7 floors below. And waited. The syndicate's inner council sat around a table of black granite in a room designed for exactly this kind of bloodshed. No windows, reinforced walls, and drains in the floor that had seen use more than once. Baek Doyen sat at the head of the table like a king on a throne, radiating alpha dominance that made the younger members drop their eyes. Kang Minwo sat at his right hand, perfectly composed, having apparently recovered from his earlier humiliation. Simon took his seat at the opposite end. The challenger's position. This is irregular, said Park Jiwon, the Busan territory commander. Emergency meetings are called by the patriarch, not. I'm the heir, Simon interrupted. Which gives me the authority to convene council in matters of succession. Silence. Because everyone in the room understood what that meant. You overstep, Doyen said softly. Dangerously. No. I'm correcting an 11-year mistake. Simon stood, and every eye in the room tracked him. I've called you here to witness 2 announcements. First, I'm dissolving my arranged mating contract with Kang Minwo, effective immediately. The room erupted. Minwo shot to his feet, sense spiking with rage and humiliation. You can't just, that contract was negotiated between our families. It's been in place for 7 years, Simon said. 7 years of political theater while we both pretended to tolerate each other. It's done. The alliance with the Kang family, someone protested, will survive through other channels. Business partnerships don't require me to mate someone I don't want. Simon's alpha command rippled through the room. The contract is void. Kang Minwo's father, a barrel-chested alpha who controlled half of Incheon, stood slowly. You insult my son. You insult my family. This requires blood recompense, Seo-jin. Then come collect it, Simon said flatly. But not tonight. Tonight, I have a second announcement. He pulled out his phone, projected an image onto the wall, Elijah's official birth certificate, DNA test results, legal documentation Philip had prepared with terrifying efficiency. This is my son. Elijah Stewart Seojin. 10 years old. Born in Seoul, raised in New York. Simon's voice was steady, absolute. As of tonight, he is my acknowledged heir. He will inherit my position, my assets, and my claim to leadership of this organization. The room went nuclear. A bastard, someone started. A foreign-born, another protested. An Omega's child, Minwo spat with venom. My child. Simon's alpha dominance exploded, making the windows rattle, making even the strongest alphas in the room submit involuntarily. Born of my blood. Carrying Biko lineage. That makes him legitimate in every way that matters. Baek Doyen had been silent through all of this, watching his son with cold calculation. Now he stood. No, he said simply. Simon met his father's eyes. You don't get a vote. I am the patriarch of this family. What I say is law. Doyen's scent flooded the room. Decades of alpha dominance, of absolute control. You will not legitimize that foreign Omega's bastard. You will not destroy everything I've built because you're too weak to let go of a mistake from your past. He's not a mistake. He's my son. He's a liability. Doyen's voice dropped to something deadly. And you're proving that you're unfit to lead. Council, I invoke the right of challenge. My son has shown weakness, poor judgment, and disregard for this organization's interests. I'm removing him as heir. The right of challenge. The nuclear option. A patriarch could remove an heir by council vote, but it required 2/3 majority. Simon had expected this. But hearing it still felt like a knife between the ribs. "You can't be serious," Park Ji-won said, though he didn't sound surprised. "He's your son. He's compromised." Doyen looked around the table. All in favor of removing Simon Seo-jin as heir and installing a new successor. 7 hands went up immediately. Doyen's loyalists, men who owed him everything. Simon's supporters hesitated. Because supporting the heir meant going against the patriarch. That was the kind of choice that got families killed. "This is madness," someone muttered. "This is survival," Doyen countered. "Simon has brought an outsider into our organization, legitimized a child born outside proper protocol, and dissolved a contract that took years to negotiate. He's ruled by emotion instead of logic. That makes him dangerous." More hands started to rise. Simon watched his world crumble in real time. The men he'd fought beside, bled with, trusted, they were abandoning him because his father commanded it. Then Kim Hye-jun, the youngest underboss, stood up. "I vote to keep Simon as heir." Doyen's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake, boy." "Maybe." Hye-jun looked at Simon. "But I remember what you did last year when the Southside crew came after my family. You could have sacrificed us to protect the larger operation. You didn't. You fought for us." He glanced around the table. "A leader who protects his people is worth more than one who treats us as disposable assets." 2 more hands joined his. Then Park Ji-won sighed heavily. "Doyen, you taught me that family is everything. That blood matters. Simon's finally acting like that lesson took. Count me in." The vote was splitting down the middle. And then the doors burst open. 4 men in tactical gear stormed in, weapons raised, Doyen's personal kill squad. They moved immediately towards Simon, clearly intending to end this with bullets rather than votes. Simon's guards returned fire. The conference room became a war zone. Someone tackled Simon to the ground as bullets tore through the space where he'd been standing. The room devolved into chaos, alphas using their dominance to shield their allies, territory commanders drawing weapons, Minwo fleeing for cover. Through it all, Baek Doyen sat calmly at the head of the table. "This could have been clean," he said, loud enough for Simon to hear over the gunfire. "But you forced my hand." Simon broke free from his guard's protective hold, crossed the room in 3 strides, and put his gun to his father's temple. "Call them off," he growled. "Now." Doyen smiled. "Shoot me, and you lose everything. The council will never follow a patricide. Then I'll burn it all down." Simon's finger tightened on the trigger. Last chance. For a long moment, father and son stared at each other. 2 alphas, 2 killers, 2 men who'd never learned how to love without destroying. Then Doyen raised his hand. The gunfire stopped. "Stand down," he ordered his kill squad. The room fell silent except for ragged breathing and the smell of gunpowder. Simon didn't lower the gun. "I'm taking Elijah. Philip too. We're leaving this building, and no one is going to stop us. Tomorrow, we'll reconvene and finish this vote. But tonight..." He pressed the barrel harder against his father's skull. "Tonight, you're going to let us walk out of here alive. And if I refuse, then you die. And I take my chances with the chaos." Baek Doyen laughed, cold, bitter, impressed despite himself. "You've finally grown a spine. About damn time." He stood slowly, hands visible. "Take your family. Leave. But understand, Simon, this isn't over. You've declared war on me, on tradition, on everything that's kept this organization alive for 3 generations." His eyes were black ice. "And in war, there are no winners. Only survivors." Simon backed toward the door, gun still trained on his father. "Then I'll survive. For them." He left the syndicate meeting behind and went back upstairs to Philip and Elijah. And for the first time in 11 years, Simon Seo-jin chose love over power. Even if it cost him everything. 3 weeks later, New York City. Simon stepped out of JFK International Airport into the chaos of New York summer heat and realized he'd never felt more out of place in his life. In Seoul, he was the Mafia king. Men cleared paths when he walked. His presence commanded rooms. His scent made people submit before he opened his mouth. Here, surrounded by millions of Americans who didn't know or care who Bekdoyan's son was, Simon was just another exhausted traveler carrying a single suitcase and the weight of 11 years of mistakes. Philip had texted him an address in Manhattan. Nothing else. No welcome, no instructions, just coordinates and, apartment 12B. Don't be late. Simon took a cab through streets that felt impossibly loud and bright compared to Seoul's neon-lit darkness. The driver was a beater who talked non-stop about the Yankees and didn't recognize alpha dominance when it was sitting in his backseat. It was strange, liberating and unsettling in equal measure. The building was in Tribeca, all exposed brick and industrial windows. Expensive. Philip had done well for himself, better than well. The tech mogul who'd been featured in Forbes, who'd built an empire from nothing while raising a child alone. Simon stood outside apartment 12B for a full minute before knocking. Elijah opened the door. "You're early," the boy said, assessing Simon with those two familiar dark eyes. "Dad said you'd probably be late because you were used to people waiting for you." Simon's mouth twitched. "Your dad knows me well. He says he used to." Elijah stepped aside, letting Simon enter. Now he's not sure. The apartment was beautiful, high ceilings, natural light, furnished with the kind of minimalist taste that spoke of money and good design sense. Photos covered one wall, Elijah at various ages, Philip at a company launch, the two of them on a beach somewhere warm and far from Korea. 11 years of life Simon had missed, documented and displayed. Philip emerged from the kitchen, drying his hands on a towel. He traded his business suit for jeans and a fitted t-shirt that showed off shoulders Simon's hands remembered touching. The Omega looked comfortable here, confident in his space in a way he'd never been in Seoul. "Simon." Philip's voice was carefully neutral. "You actually came. You doubted I would." "I doubted a lot of things about you." Philip tossed the towel aside. "But you've been surprising me lately. Let's see if it continues." The first week was excruciating. Simon didn't know how to be a father. Didn't know how to talk to a 10-year-old who looked at him with equal parts curiosity and caution. Didn't know how to exist in a space where he wasn't in control, where Philip made the rules and Simon had to follow them. "Elijah has soccer practice on Tuesdays and Thursdays," Philip had said on day 2. "You can pick him up if you want. Be there at 5 p.m. Not 5:15, not 5:30. 5 o'clock, or don't bother." Simon showed up at 4:45. He stood on the sidelines with other parents, betas and omegas mostly, some alphas who chatted about their kids' performance and didn't posture for dominance. Watched Elijah play midfielder with a ferocity that came directly from Biko bloodline genetics. When practice ended, Elijah jogged over, sweaty and grinning. "Did you see my assist?" "I saw." Simon handed him a water bottle. "You left your back line exposed when you pushed forward. Next time, check your 6. Elijah blinked. "You know soccer?" "I know tactical positioning." Simon's mouth quirked. "Same principles apply." Something shifted in Elijah's expression. Interest, maybe. Or the beginning of respect. They stopped for ice cream on the way home, Elijah's request, not Simon's plan. The boy ordered mint chocolate chip and then proceeded to interrogate Simon about Seoul, about the syndicate, about whether he'd ever actually killed anyone. "Elijah," Simon said carefully, "those aren't appropriate. Dad says you're a criminal." Elijah licked his ice cream cone. "He also says you're trying to be better. So which is it?" Simon looked at this fierce, brilliant child and decided on honesty. "Both. I've done terrible things. Hurt people. Built an empire on violence and fear. But I'm trying to be someone your father doesn't have to protect you from." "Are you going to keep being a crime boss?" "I don't know yet." Simon's phone had been buzzing constantly with calls from Seoul. The power struggle with his father was ongoing, brutal. That life is complicated. Dad says complicated is just another word for scared to choose. Simon laughed, surprised. "Your dad is very wise." He's also listening from the car, Elijah stage whispered, pointing to where Philip sat in his Tesla, pretending not to watch them. The private moments with Philip came in fragments. Late nights after Elijah went to bed, when Simon would find Philip on the rooftop terrace with a glass of wine, staring at the Manhattan skyline. "You don't have to stay up here alone," Simon said one night, stepping out into the cooling air. "I'm not alone. I'm avoiding you." But Philip didn't leave when Simon sat down beside him. They existed in careful proximity, close enough to feel the incomplete bond pulse between them, far enough that it didn't hurt. "Mostly. He likes you," Philip said after a long silence. "Elijah. He tries not to show it, but he does. He's incredible." Simon's voice was rough. "You raised him well. Alone. I should have." "Don't." Philip cut him off. "Don't apologize again. I've heard it. I know you're sorry. What I need to know is what happens next. What do you want to happen?" Philip turned to look at him, and in the city lights, his eyes were unreadable. "I want you to be honest. Are you staying in New York, or is this temporary? Are you going back to Seoul to finish your war with your father? Are you planning to be in Elijah's life consistently, or is this guilt-driven tourism?" "I don't know," Simon admitted. "The syndicate is tearing itself apart. My father won't stop until I'm dead or broken. But if I go back to fight him, I might not survive. And if I don't go back," he stopped. "Everything I've built, everyone who supported me, they'll suffer. So you're trapped between two impossible choices again." Philip's voice was bitter. "Some things never change." "No." Simon turned to face him fully. "This time, I'm choosing. Elijah is my priority. You are my priority. The syndicate can burn, my father can win, I don't care. I'm not losing you both again." Philip's breath caught. The bond between them flared, aching and alive. "Pretty words," Philip whispered. "But I need to see action, Simon. Consistent, boring, everyday action. Showing up for soccer practice. Helping with homework. Being present." "I will be." Simon's hand moved toward Philip's, stopped just short of touching. "I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I destroyed what we had. But if you'll let me, I want to build something new. Something better." "I'm not promising anything," Philip said, but he didn't pull away. "My heart isn't available just because you finally grew a conscience. You want me back? You earn it. Day by day, choice by choice." "That's fair." They sat in silence, the bond humming between them like a question neither was ready to answer. 6 months later, the rooftop had become their place. Simon had officially relocated to New York, taking only what he could carry and leaving the Biko syndicate to tear itself apart without him. His father had won the power struggle, but lost his heir. The price of victory was an empty throne. Elijah was playing a few feet away, practicing tricks with his soccer ball, his scent finally starting to show the first signs of presentation. Probably alpha, based on the developing dominance markers. He'd take after his father in that, at least. Philip stood beside Simon at the railing, watching the sun set over Manhattan. The sky was painted in oranges and purples, nothing like Seoul's neon nights. "He asked me yesterday if you were staying," Philip said quietly. "What did you tell him?" "That it was up to you." Philip glanced at Simon. "Is it? Are you staying?" Simon looked at his son, this miracle he'd almost missed, this fierce boy who was learning to trust him one soccer practice at a time. Then at Philip, the Omega who'd survived him and thrived, who'd built a life so full that Simon's presence was optional, not necessary. "Yes," Simon said simply. "I'm staying." Philip's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Good." They stood in comfortable silence, the incomplete bond between them pulsing with possibility. It wasn't the desperate, consuming connection they'd had 11 years ago. It was something more mature, more honest. "We're not going back to what we were," Philip said, echoing a conversation they'd had months ago. Simon smiled, the expression still feeling foreign on his face but getting easier. "No. We're going to be something different. Something better. Maybe." Philip's hand found Simon's, their fingers intertwining. "If you don't fuck it up." "I'll try not to." Elijah called out, "Dad." Simon, "Watch this," and proceeded to execute a perfect bicycle kick that sent the balls sailing over their heads. Both men turned to watch, and in that moment, standing together, watching their son, the incomplete bond humming between them like a promise and a question mark, Simon felt something he hadn't felt in 11 years. Hope. The future wasn't certain. The bond might never complete. Philip might never fully forgive him. His father's shadow would always haunt him. But here, on this rooftop, with the sunset painting the sky and his family beside him, Simon Seojin was finally free.